All right, thank you everyone for coming. It's yet another full house for a creative conversation. Very appreciative of you braving the bad weather. I'm Ben Hickey, representing the Hilliard Art Museum tonight. And it's my honor to introduce Noel W Anderson. He is a Louisiana, Kentucky native. He's earned his MFA from Indiana University in printmaking, or rather his BFA, and his MFA from Yale in sculpture. Currently, he's the area head of print media in the Steinhardt Department of Art and Art Professions at New York University. His work resides in the collections of the Hunter Museum of American Art, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and the International Center of Photography, among others. His writing was published in October, and he's also a Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Award nominee. His residencies include stays at the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts, the Hermitage Artist Retreat, and the Tamarin Press Visiting Artist Edition. Currently, he has 2 other solo shows on view, Black Exhaustion at Salzburger Kunstverein, and It Belongs in a Museum at JDJ in New York. With no further ado, Noel W Anderson.
Don't be so afraid. Thank you. You know, when I was a boy, well, actually, Deion Sanders made it more real now. But when I was a boy, music was my life. I played the viola. That's a secret. And I'm going to lay a lot of secrets on you all today, because I believe the audience is my confession. You all are my print. I'm going to imprint a whole lot of mess on y'all. And then I'm going to leave, and it's going to be you to deal with it, because it's your life, especially the students. You all the future. You are. I'm sorry. I have to apologize. Dead ass, as my students say, or not me trying to do this. So dead ass. I'm sorry that we're leaving a world for you in the way that we're leaving it. Seriously. I talk to my students all the time about it. And I'm like feeling this anxiety from them. And I ask them, what the hell is wrong with you? I don't say it like that. I'm more compassionate. Therapy works. And they say, do you see the state of the world? I say, oh man, I'm sorry, we're leaving you a shit show. But then I say, but the fact that you care gives me hope. Because you're not apathetic, you're not myopic, you're not lazy, you care. I'm gonna say it again, you care. Heidegger talks about caring. Huey Copeland, the brilliant brother from Cali, he talked about caring. What does it mean to care? Bell Hooks talks about caring and love. Ooh, she'd take you somewhere. And then I look at my students and I think, we're gonna be all right, because you understand the function of art is to change the world. You dig? 99999. You must treat me like Stevie Wonder. I can't see, I can only hear. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Nah, come now. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? There we go, call and response. Welcome to the church, the congregation is here. Ah, the 2 in the back who were beautiful and brilliant today, you're going to be my camera people. Now, before I get started, yes, ladies, please. Please, yes, one of you, please. You were rolling up things, you were rolling them out, you were cleaning ink. You thought your job was done. 99999. Never done. The artist's job is never done. Can you do me a favor? As I work, because that's what this is, can you shoot some photographs from the back? My social media director will hate me if I don't do that. Hopefully the phone doesn't close, but if it closed, ask me the password and I'm sure I'll yell it out in front of everyone. Okay. Hi, I'm Noel Anderson, Noel W Anderson. I want to say first, thank you for the invitation. The work is quite new. We'll go into why it's quite new. Thank you for the museum. And thank you, Brian. We're gonna be working together a long time, you just don't know it yet. It was the music choice that got me. Now, you've never been to the print lab, the brothers fierce. You go in there and all of a sudden it's like Nirvana's playing, you're like, okay, I don't know no Teen Spirit. Then all of a sudden, Nirvana slips. It doesn't transition, it slips. There's a difference. It slips into the Notorious B.I.G. You dig what I'm saying? Then all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute, is this AC/DC? You know, the only thing that was missing was a little Patsy Cline and you would have been in the house. You know, or maybe some Serge Gainsborough or something. But thank you so much, man. It's a big deal. You're a great teacher. I don't say that lightly. It makes me want to cry because a lot of people don't teach the way you teach. Understand what you have. This motherfucker's a gem. Okay, I'm serious. I work with a lot of faculty in my lifetime, and I haven't seen a handful of them who cares and commits himself to his students the way he does. It's freaking beautiful, man. I've been saying it since I've been here, but I just have to say it again in front of everyone. I have to make, what do they call this in therapy? Integration. You put it into the world so it's real. So that's good. That's all right. It's not working. It closed on you? No, I was just checking this. All right. So I'm Noel W Anderson, originally from Louisville, Kentucky, youngest of 6. I got my BFA from Ohio Wesleyan, Delaware, Ohio, small place, not much happening. It was a great place to make work and think, because you're not distracted like one becomes in New York. I got my first master's degree in printmaking from Indiana University. And then I got my second master's degree, I am a glutton for it, from Yale in sculpture. And I used to TA and teach at Yale. And then I taught at Vanderbilt and worked at the YMCA. It was great. It was great. I had a free gym membership and cable. It's a benefit, you know. And then I was an assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati, and now I'm a professor at NYU for the interim or something. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is, what the hell do I do? I'm a weird guy, man, and it's kind of awesome. But I'm seeing a lot of weird people in the crowd, and I think I'm amongst family. Because I feel like we're not just the low, please come, there are chairs. We're not just the lowest people on the totem pole, we're the thing that makes the whole shit work. I'm gonna say that again. We're not just the lowest people on the totem pole, we are the ones that make the whole shit work. Because usually the ones you don't see, or the people who get marginalized, are the ones who are actually moving the gears. And your job as students is to move the gears. That means make me think. What is thinking? Charge me. Confuse me, confound me, make me work for something, and push me beyond myself so I can become a better person. Does everybody dig me? Nah, you must speak up. Yeah? Okay, I say that now because when you graduate and you leave this place, if you don't speak up for yourself, someone's gonna do the speaking for you. And they're gonna brand you in a way that's probably not who you are. Does everybody dig me? Yes. I know that's right, the congregation has arrived. It arrived. Sophia, yes? How you doing, family? Thanks for coming today. We appreciate you. And the conversation yesterday was fierce. Okay, let's get into it. So what I'd like to do is briefly lay out, I just don't want to run over time. I can get this done. I'd like to do a real brief foundation of what it is I'm doing now, and it all starts with images. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and my father used to buy these learn how to draw a comic book character in 6 easy steps. And he did that because he was a civil engineer and he would drive to his job, his sites. And them sites would be 2-3 hours away. And he would put me and my brother in the car, my brother and me, there we go, in the car. And he would give me this book and a sheet of transfer paper, carbon copy. I don't know if you all know what that is, but carbon copy, and tracing paper. And I would trace Fred Flintstone's head on Scooby-Doo's body. I thought it was special. I thought I was really doing something, man. And I wasn't really doing something until I would go to the basement of the house. He had a photocopy machine. And for those who don't know, you should look up the artist. He's passed away, but the dude was fierce. Name is Sigmar Polke. He's one of the great Germans. Really weird dude. I thought I was doing something. Then I saw his work and I was like, oh man, he beat me to it 40 years ago, But that also helped me because I realized I had a community. Whether they are alive or not, I'm a part of something bigger than myself. You are, okay? So it started with images. Let's see, you know what? How does one do that? You know what, let's just do this. I like a scroll. Can everybody see that? Let's just do it like it's in class. Well, if the technology fails, we just make it do what we want it to do. All right, so it started with images. And what I used to do when I was in grad school, I used to buy, well, I didn't sleep a lot because I was so nervous about failure. And I would stay up all hours of the night, and I would buy up Ebony magazines in bulk. Yeah? And you used to be able to buy like 100 of them for like $10 because didn't nobody want them, and all these libraries were dumping them. I thought, this is fertile. There's something here, you know? And when I was in my studio, I kept looking at these images and thinking, these aren't real. I didn't know who this person was. The person in this image that didn't apply to my existence. And then I broke that thing down into a very stupid, ignorant level. I think you have to be stupid and ignorant because that's when you're very accessible and the world gives itself to you. And I realized all I was looking at was not an image of a person. I was looking at a bunch of dots of ink on paper. And I thought if I could find a way to erase those dots, I could challenge the reality of this idea, of this woman. So I started that Rauschenberg kills de Kooning kind of thing. You erase de Kooning, blah, 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 blah. That took too long. I got things to do, man. So I started mixing these chemicals and erasing the things by hand. It's very fast. And it got real painterly. So I have a background in painting and printmaking, right? So I started erasing them, and I realized I could also play with the language that was on the page, right? So the image you're seeing here, Check the Skin, was a woman. It was a cosmetic advertisement, and I used a chemical to erase it. Yeah? It's all about erasure. That's important. But it's deeper than that. Or as Martin Luther King Jr. said, but I wouldn't stop there. He's mining. That's his last speech. But I wouldn't stop there. It's at the church. I wouldn't stop there. I found other images that charged me and found other ways to erase them, but also subvert the gaze of the audience. Yeah? I started to realize the beautiful part about these images wasn't just the patina of the page, because all the pages from the 60s and 70s have the best color. The 80s are terrible. They're smaller pages, they're hard to erase, the whole thing. Yeah? I also thought that the gaze that the subject had or the model had in the image could speak back. I thought by erasing it, I could make this thing say something that it normally wouldn't, by which I mean the image, not the person. So when I got to that point and I realized, holy shit, I had solved it. The image wasn't real. It didn't give me an understanding of what it meant to be in that reality. So I graduated. And I used to have this art dealer. This was in 2010. His name was Jack Tilton. If you don't know Jack Tilton, you should probably look him up. He's passed away now. God rest your soul, man. But he was great because he discovered all the great artists. If you don't know David Hammons, write David Hammons down. He is the Duchamp of the black art world. He's the Duchamp of the art world now. He's a genius. He discovered David, Marlene Dumas, Carol Walker. Yeah? And then he came to my studio and he found some value, which I didn't see value in it, but he found value in me. It's important when someone finds value in you, you know? They invest. So he gave me this show. And I would go hang out with him at his gallery on the Upper East Side periodically. And he was great because you could sit there and he could talk about anything. He would talk about Rauschenberg. He would talk about, oh yeah, Rauschenberg used to come here. We would hang out all the time, man. And I would say, that's brilliant. Tell me more. Because I wanted to be this person. And he would say, but no. But he had Parkinson's at the time. He would say, no, you gotta go to the Metropolitan on Fridays. And I would say, well, Jack, man, I don't gotta go on no Friday. I go on a Thursday. I go every other day. He said, but on Fridays, all the great artists go. And this was like in 2010. And it was important because the tourists didn't know about it yet. And they had late hours. And you used to be able to go, and I would try to find people like Richard Tuttle or David Hammond staring at things. Right? And Richard Tuttle was notorious because he would go to the African wing and he would stare at rocks. So I would find Richard Tuttle staring at rocks. And I would stare at Richard Tuttle staring at a rock. I would say, there's a rock, but wait a minute, Richard Tuttle is staring at it. That's interesting. And then I heard Rauschenberg give this interview on this great documentary. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's from 1968, maybe. Painters Painting. That's a great one. Because you get all the old cats from abstract expressionism and the new move with like neo-Dada and stuff, talking about what it's like to be an artist in the 60s, 70s, 40s. Great. And he said something about Duchamp. He said, the interviewer asked him, well, you know, you and Duchamp were friends. And they actually asked Jasper Johns the same thing, and Johns and Rauschenberg were partners, you see. And they said, well, why didn't you just do some of the things that Duchamp was doing? And they both gave the same laugh, and they said, but he had already figured it out. Why did I want to do something he had figured out? Your job is to figure out new stuff. Give me something new. I get bored easily. It's not the ADHD or something. It's just, yeah, I've seen a number of paintings that look like these things. Boo, yawn, not interested. So when I would go to the Met and I would look at Tuttle, I said, well, let me find a place where no one is. And no one was in this great hall. Nobody was there. It would be me and the attendant. And with me and the attendant standing there, we would talk about these tapestries. And you know, that's what's great about the museums. Security or the help, they know a lot more about the work than sometimes the curator knows. Because they sit there all day and they stare at these things and think and read. Like some of the greatest artists, like Robert Ryman, he was a security guard at the Met, I believe, right? He talks about learning how to paint just by being in there and staring at paintings while working. I thought that was interesting. But when I looked at these, I realized there was something more interesting there. It was the advent of computers. It's advent of television. I didn't realize it. What happened was I read this book. And this book says that there's this guy. We're just going to keep rolling. There's this guy in the early 19th century, Jacquard, invented this way of weaving, right? It's a punch card. You have a slew of these cards, and they're cardboard. There's a bunch of holes in them. And those holes correspond to an image. Wherever there is a hole, thread goes through in the loom and weaves something. Wherever there is no hole, it doesn't go through. There's a stack of them, there's tons, and they all correspond to an image. I realized that was binary code. And then I thought, well, it's got to be deeper than that. And I found that the English mathematician Charles Babbage in like 1815 found these punch cards and says, I can make a machine that automates logarithms, a calculator. Then years later, IBM picked that whole system up. And I thought, well, every time I'm staring at a tapestry, I'm staring at a screen. And it broke me wide open. It blew me away. I was like, I think I figured something out. I thought I was a genius. Oh. But I had a problem. I'm always chasing David Hammond's ghost. He haunts me. I don't want to kill the father. I'm not Rauschenberg. I want to explore what this man is doing. These are when he was doing these body prints where he's rubbing chicken grease over his body, and then he's pushing himself onto them, and then he sprinkles pigments and graphite on them. They're just beautiful. This man broke the mold. Not everybody was doing it, but this man invented this thing. And I thought, okay, well, dead ass. I'm going to take this photograph, which in my opinion, if it comes from a lens, it also comes from a screen. Screens and lenses are the same thing in my sense, yeah? I'm going to take this photograph and have it woven. I had it woven into a tapestry. But at the time, I had a studio in Cincinnati. It was like 2,000 square feet, man. 3rd floor, factory, elevator went right to the studio. Freight, paid $100 a month for that place. And while I was in there, I was able to get lost. There were no rules. There was no fear. I had no obligations, you know? And I just started pouring material on this tapestry. But something happened on the way to the forum. I lost the image. I had put too much down. And I went into total panic. Seriously. I was like, oh my God, the image was supposed to be there. The image was supposed to be there. What happened? I went into have any of you all ever done that? You do something in the studio, right? You got to speak to me now. Right? You do it and then you just go into a total panic because you had this thought that it was supposed to be this way and there was a structure and there was a way, there was a path and the path was supposed to take me to the end of this thing and it was supposed to look the way, oh my God, it's not working. But then I left. I came back the next day and it had revealed itself to me, the possibility of abstraction. I realized that abstraction is just a way to think about the ways in which we are all moving in the world. We are abstracted every day. When we are othered by people, we are abstracted. Because when you are othered, All the things that are you are reduced out. I'm gonna say that again. When you are othered or made to feel different, the things that are really you, that are your core, whomever is othering you has stripped those away and reduced those out. That is called abstraction. It's also called extraction. Dig? But it didn't stop there. I started doing these weavings and they were at the scale of the body. So this one's like, I guess it's as high as this thing. Yeah. And because I thought of them as bodies, I started to treat them like bodies. I was physical to them. Because at that time, I was like, well, they're treating black bodies in a particular way. What if I replicate that expression into these works? So when I hung them, they slumped like bodies. Yeah? And I really loved this. Let me see if I have an image. I loved it because I went out and had someone custom make all these slides for me, glass slides, because at the time, no one makes slides anymore. And I found this guy in Ohio who makes all these slides. And I was like, can you make these slides from these porn magazines? He was like, sure. Yeah, don't ask questions. And I loved it because when you came to the work, we're here, yeah. When you came to the work, you had to engage this animal. You had to get into its belly, its undercarriage, right? But you didn't understand. You get so close, this thing breathes back because it's fabric. Painting can't do that. Tapestry could. So what you're looking at is a tapestry from a coloring book, a Fat Albert coloring book. And I threw the kitchen sink at this thing. It's like polyurethane, foam. There's dye, acrylic, a whole slew of things. There's carpet mats, because that's what we had in the studio. I was just gluing things I had. I didn't want to spend money. I owed Sally Mae. When Sally Mae came for them student loans, it was a hijack. It wasn't that check came and I was like, wait, this check looking a little light. $1,000 light every month, you know? So I did what I had to do to survive. I found materials. And then I reverted to a thing that I think everyone should revert to as an artist, because it's your holy grail. I reverted to art history, because I was looking for forms that were familiar to an art audience, but trying to inject black subjectivity. You can look at someone like a Kehinde Wiley, he does that. But I wanted to do it not so pretty. And I found this painting, which I've always loved, the Goya. And then I found this photograph from the FBI of black men being arrested. Now this thing is like, what is this? It's about 8 feet by 12 feet long. So you feel the scale of these figures. Does everybody dig me? Right? But we have to go back to what I said before about the televisual, about television and the screen and binary and weaving and textile as the ground for television, right? What do you see? Now, if this were my class, I would ask and I would wait until someone tells me, but we're running out of time. You see a warped image. And that's all planned. I do all that stuff either on a photocopy machine, or I do it in like an Illustrator, or I do it in Photoshop, right? And that warping of the image correlates to the 80s. So when I was a boy in the 80s, I'm the youngest of 6, we had this long dinner table in the kitchen. There was a TV in the corner. It had rabbit ears. I sat right next to my father. I was his favorite. Maybe, I don't know. And and you have to understand, he went to MIT in the 50s, so he knew his English, his elocution was brilliant. He would say, pronunciate and enunciate. So when he code switched, you knew he wasn't playing. So he would say, boy, go fix that. He wouldn't call you by your first name, because he was from North Carolina. He knew, he was like, boy, go fix that. Okay, I would go and play with it. And I realized then, this not right, this not real. Because if a child of 6 can stabilize and destabilize the image, there's something here that don't make no sense. You dig? And I tried to put that into the work. So when you see the work, there's all of this warping and waving. And because it's at scale, and actually bigger than human scale, you feel it. It projects into you and onto you. I'm conscious of that stuff. I play this stuff in my studio, right? I don't just do it and then show it. I do things, I put them on the wall in my studio, and I sit with those things for a long time. And I think about them. There are days I go to the studio, all I do is put on some music and stare at stuff and take notes. Sometimes I'll be right here on the tapestry like, what the hell is going on, man? Trying to figure it out. You dig? Like, I need to go to the studio with questions. I'm not interested in going and already knowing what I'm doing. That's boring. So this produced questions. right? It also produced these great moments of animality, which we were talking about. Where are we? Where are we? She's not here. I don't know. Animality in the work, right? Because if you look at it long enough and really stare, you start to realize that all the legs are going backwards like a goat. They become satyrs. That gets Greek. That's tragic, right? But then there's also this power struggle in the image. You look at the central cop, who is a man of color, and he has this long, slithering shotgun. That's a snake. And there's that whole sexual innuendo, the size of the black male's member. Oh, yes. But he's not really in power. Because if you stare long enough, you see the white cop here. And he merges into this building, which is really looped in over here. So the whole image is looping. Jasper Johns taught me that. Fool's House, if you stare at it, the thing loops. And he makes the painting three-dimensional. But if you see it, look at how small this gun is. Playing with that sexual innuendo is important for me. Because these men are all half naked. So this is an image from Philadelphia where they went into a house and pulled a bunch of men out. Yeah, they used to strip them. And they would strip black men, one, to embarrass them, yeah, but they would also strip them so that they could see if they weren't armed. I happen to think it was a sexual desire thing myself. So I'm trying to subtly play that in these works. But it doesn't stop there. The works themselves are all woven of cotton, all American cotton. And what we do in my studio, we'll get there. And we'll see it more in different photographs as we go down. What we do in my studio is when we have about 6 to 10 tapestries being woven at this facility in the South. And when one's done, they'll call me and say, "Noel, we got it." We'll send it to the studio. My studio manager we'll get it out of the box and we put it on the wall. And then we go work on it. We take these needles, they're called awls, and we go between the threads and we pull and we pluck and we pull. And what we're doing is picking cotton. So I'm trying to take these aspects of the history of the material and the history of black labor and recuperate it and see if I can work it into my practice. Does everybody dig me? Oh yeah, we picking cotton. But it doesn't stop there. The significance of the tapestry comes from modernism. And I mean modernism not like 1900s. I mean modernism like 14th century, because that's when modernism really starts. The age of conquest. Empire is modernism. Dig? And all of these people who were like getting Columbus to come and do things and searching the world, all of these kings and queens, their main expression of power was tapestry. It is, right? They would have these huge tapestries and they put them on the wall and they function as insulation, which is kind of sculpture, right? But then I realized after knowing that I could really fuss with it. After reading about Peter Paul Rubens, right, he makes the cartoon, which is the painting. He then gives it to the Weaving Guild so this king can have this huge tapestry. Then the Weaving Guild says, but Peter, these pinks that you have are too nuanced. And Peter says with his ego, well, screw it, give it back. He takes the cartoon and then he gives it to the printer. He can print this thing ad infinitum. That image has gone through painting, weaving, print, and it easily can be photography. So when I'm doing this work, I'm thinking about all of these histories. Dig? It's just always in me. But thinking about the way I lost David Hammons in that image, right? I call it falling into abstraction. I then started to lean on some of my other models, like Sam Gilliam, a fellow Louisvillian from the color field. He just passed away this year. If you don't know Sam, you better get to know him. This dude is he was a great printmaker. He's a great artist. He's a great businessman. What I learned about how to be an artist who's basically running a business, I learned it from him. He taught me, while you're making something, make a bunch of it, because you're not going to want to come back and remake it, you know? And you can take that stuff, store it, sell one thing, and then when you need to sell something else, you just go to the storage, you pull it out, and you sell another one. Or you give it to your family, and that accrues value. Does everybody dig? There are ways to this game, man. You just don't make stuff and hope that it works. No, there's a business. You know, I'm a businessman or I'm a businessman. And what Sam gave me was to think about abstraction in a different way, the way he drapes, right? The parabola that he created. I started doing it with images. right? So the image you're looking at here is this, right? Another lineup. I kind of like the way, if you think about the way Anselm Kiefer takes you back into one-point perspective. It takes you into the space. This isn't a space I want to go in, but it draws you in. And then I decided, well, but I don't want to give people access to this. So I started draping them. And I loved what that was doing. Because like the earlier works of the works that I was doing with the foam and stuff, it required the viewer to move. And then I would go to the museum. Baby, I would go to the museum and watch the choreography. I would sit there and watch people do this. I was like, okay, fly girl, get it. I thought it was Living Color all over again. Rosie Perez was in the house, do the right thing at the beginning when she's in the red, killing it. I was like, get it, Rosie. And then a woman came to the museum and made a complaint, and I thought it was brilliant. She said, but why can't I see the whole thing? And they told me that, and I laughed, and the curator said, why are you laughing? I said, because that's the point. You don't get access. Because these subjects to me are too special. Yeah, you don't get access. And this kind of draping becomes very protective. It's a protective mechanism. But if you stare at it long enough, you see it's a crown. So all these levels of things I'm trying to get through. But I wouldn't stop there. So this piece was in LA, and then we showed it last year at Berlin Biennale. And it's a photograph of people getting arrested during the LA riots in 91, 92. But what was significant about it was, for me, so it's three figures on the hood of a cop car, and this figure in the middle, there's two men, and the figure in the middle is a woman. And I was reading this book about the way state authorities strip people of their gender or their identities, and the way slavery removed gender and identified everybody just as property. And I saw this image, and I was like, they're treating her as physical as the men. They've stripped this woman of some kind of value. And then this image of this face of terror. When it's draped, it gets even more terrifying because the face warps and it does a whole thing. But I wouldn't stop there. Because abstraction is promise. What do I mean by that? Representation proper gives you something, you see, you say, okay, I get it, I understand, that's a thing. That's a horse. But abstraction doesn't do that. Abstraction requires you to come to the territory and figure stuff out. And I started to go back to my art history books and realizing I love Mark Tobey for what he calls white writing. I love the linearity of a Mark Tobey. I love that stuff. I love all this pre-Jackson Pollock calligraphy. Dig? And he calls it white writing. That's important. You'll learn in a second. That's important. I love going to the Met in the modern wing and sitting on a bench on a Tuesday morning and staring at a Jackson Pollock. I love that. I love getting into a Pollock and being like, okay, I see that pink, but where that pink going? Where that pink going? Where that pink? Oh, there's that pink. I love that. I love going to the Met and staring at de Kooning and trying to figure out how the hell did he do that? And saying, oh, he put the paint down, then he took the magazine, he impressed the magazine, pulled it off, and he made a print. So half of those paintings that he did in the 40s and 50s have prints in them. They're fucking beautiful. But I only get that because I go into the territory and I stare at stuff. You know, like Jasper Johns told my man Rob Storr, who used to be the curator of painting at MoMA. It was a Tuesday, it was like a Tuesday morning, nobody was there, and Jasper was on his bench staring at a Duchamp. And Rob goes by and says, oh, Jasper, how are you doing? And Jasper says, hey, Rob, how are you? And then Rob says, what the hell are you doing here? And Jasper says, I'm looking for something to steal. That's all I'm doing. I'm looking for things to steal and try to translate them or transform them. You know, a Helen Frankenthaler, her color field paintings are brilliant. Brilliant artist. Edge, color, brilliant. What am I supposed to do with that? Well, like I tell people, I'm going to do Sam Gilliam to images. I'm going to do Helen Frankenthaler to images. If you don't know, I guess the best reference would be Stan Brakhage. I'm trying to do Stan Brakhage, really. Because Stan Brakhage's films that are really paintings are brilliant. They're just phenomenal. Plus, he's a writer. He was a writer, and his writing's okay. His films are better. Just saying, my opinion. So I have all these images and that I'm building an archive. I collect a bunch of images. Some of the images are just digital files. So a lot of the images now, I buy them from a bunch of random sources. And this particular image, I don't own this one, but I own what I did to it. So I had it woven. And then I reversed it so they go sandwiched, right? They mirror each other, right? And then I started to figure out, okay, well, Helen Frankenthaler uses paint. Let me try that. I would pour paint on them, and that would harden the surface, right? And I said, but the killer app of this work is the luscious softness of it. And that luscious, precious, beautiful softness meeting this thing, wait a minute now, meeting that, I had to do it. Well, like, what am I supposed to do? This image and it's lush and soft. So what I started to do were these things called Rorschachs, right? Or horror shacks. And I would start pouring dye onto them and mirroring them so that the dyes would also mirror. So it becomes like a Rorschach test. Does everybody dig me? Right? But I'm also a linguist. I like to play with language. So you could put HOR in front of it in parentheses and it's a horror shack. It gets to the psychological dimension of the image. Does everybody dig what I'm saying? But then again, you look at it closely, and it's all these beautiful pinks. And all this kind of, I had some of this beautiful metallic leaf, like gold leaf. I figured how to glue it in there and brush it in so that it still keeps the soft integrity of the fibers, right? And then I started thinking, okay, well, wait a minute now. I'm reading this thing by this woman named Hélène Cizot. She's a French feminist. She wrote this great text in the 70s that cites something like, women need to write their bodies. And what does it mean for women to write their bodies? And I'm dumb, man. I'm literal, man. I'm on the ground with the best stuff is smoked. You dig? And I thought, okay, well, what does it mean to write your body? Well, it means you cut the flesh out of your body and you make letters out of it. I said, well, I'm a black man. I'm not going to do that, man. My shit's too beautiful. But I tried to find a material. I sourced a material that referenced black bodies and subsequently looked like black bodies, which is basketball material. If you really look at it, it looks just like a black body. It has a brown bumps on the surface and an orange tone. It's beautiful. So then I said, okay, well, let me cut these words out. So I found a laser cutting company in the Navy Yard in Brooklyn. I took a huge roll of that stuff over there. I put it on and I said, can we cut that? He said, yeah. They do all my letters now. So we cut all the letters and we bring them back to the studio and we glue them together and then we stitch them into the warp and weft. But it doesn't stop there. If you look at it closely, you can see the picking of the fibers. Does everybody see that? The picking of the cotton becomes like confetti. That's black writing. That's me looking at Toby and Pollock and finding a gesture that approaches that. But painting can't do that. Because when you see them in person, like some of these, they become dimensional. Painting can't do that. So then I was interested in working with more images. And this is an image from the LA riots in 91, 92. Not riots, the LA Revolution. There we go. But I didn't want to replicate this. This to me didn't seem that interesting. I was thinking about disassociation. You know, when you're going through some shit, a pain, and it's like happening to you, and instead of focusing on the pain, you just kind of stare off into something, and you identify that as a place where I am now, and this thing is happening to me, but you know, I'm not thinking about it because these shutters are just amazing. And then when it's over, I have no memory of it. I thought that would be interesting, so what I did was I found something, which is this tree in the background, and I disassociated. Disassociation. Yeah. Your titles are important, man. Untitled only goes so far. You know, my titles come from wordplay. My titles come from poetry. My titles come from songs. I'm about to do a piece. It's a two-leg piece, and it's called "Tripping Like I Got 2 Feet." That's a Lil Wayne lyric. I heard it the other day. I was like, boom, I jotted that down. I was like, I got to take it, right? So what you're looking at is a diptych. Two images, the same image, inverted, put on top of each other, right? But what's really brutal about it is I start bringing the animals in. It's a two-headed chick, okay? And it's balanced on it's a multicolored mirror. So that when the viewer comes and investigates this chick, this two-headed chick, they also see themselves in it. Trying to find different ways to bring the audience in. I have to draw them in any way. Yeah? But I wouldn't stop there. I took that idea of the mirror and ways to draw people in, and I thought, okay, I have a number of images that have mirrors in them. And I started to realize that the image of some of the police officers implicitly already have mirrors in them because of the cop car. So I did what I learned when I was drawing when I was an undergrad. You didn't just draw one thing and do. You drew, you rotated the paper, you drew some more, you rotated it, you just kept rotating until you saw different shit. And what I saw was that. All of that. I thought that was brilliant. So I started making weavings of just the reflection. And if you stare long enough, you can see the break in the car. Everything down here is focused in real time, I guess you could say that, not the reflection. And everything up here is a reflection. When you see it in person, you still can't see it until you stare at it long enough and it slowly reveals itself to you. Dig? Your job as an artist is to keep me here as long as possible. Your job as an artist, or one of them, is to keep me here as long as possible. And I advocate that you do that by creating conundrums. Questions for the audience where they, how did that happen? But also work in a way that seduces them to stay. My way of doing that is the material. You dig what I'm saying? There are multiple ways to the game. That's just my access point, right? And all of this is picked. All this is all hand-picked, yeah? And there are moments in here, like here, there's a mirror. I started gluing mirrors into the warp and the weft because I realized there were two sides. So I would cut the holes out and put mirrors on the back and then patch them up. Things are only flat if you make them flat. Everything is dimensional. A sheet of paper has dimension. Your job is to find it. Does everybody dig me? Okay, I hope. But I wouldn't stop there. So the new show, we just got all these images yesterday. And so actually some of them came today. So when I got back to the hotel, it was like, I don't know, 4. And I just got the email like, hey, we just got all the images. And I was like, okay, let me see if I can put this in the PowerPoint. So I have 3 shows up right now. 4. I have one in New York called Black Exhaustion. The second part of that is in Salzburg called Black Exhaustion, Salzburg. Same kind of imagery, just a different configuration. I don't have images for that because I didn't have time to put them in, but this is good for now. So the idea of the show was I have 3 shows that I'm working on. I've already done one. It's called, and they're all together. They're my trilogy. I'm Octavia Butler, man. The first one is called, the one we already did was Black Erasure. This one is Black Exhaustion, and in 2025 at the Albany Museum of Art, I'm doing the third part, which is Black Excellence. And this all came out of COVID. No. Well, that's interesting. Renew? Should I renew this? Oh. No. I love it when this happens. I never worry. It happens all the time in class. This is smooth compared to NYU.
You hear that?
No, seriously, it is. Let's see what Renew gets us. Roll the dice.
Let's do it. Oh, there we go.
See, look at us speaking. Thank you. Yes. So the idea came out of COVID. I thought, well, I'm fucking tired, man. And I thought, okay, well, there seems to be a series of conditions under which I feel myself, and there's a path to it. So there's this thing, and everybody does it. It's not related to limited to black people. It's limited. It's specific to alterity, by which I mean otherness. You work really hard because you want to be excellent, Black excellence. But in that working, you get tired, Black exhaustion. And the exhaustion and the working combine because then you end up becoming erased. You're erasing yourself through Gesundheit. You're erasing yourself through the process. Does everybody dig me? It happens to everybody. That's not limited to black people. I just felt like making a show that made sense to me. So there are 3 shows, which is going to culminate in a huge catalog with essays and pictures. This is just one of the shows. So this is Black Exhaustion. We have another version in Salzburg. And what we did was we made a coloring book. right? We edited, we made this whole coloring book. So when you go to the show, you get a coloring book. And it has one of my essays in it, another essay, and it basically functions as a coloring book. You color in all these designs that I've made, dig? And the idea was that it's a huge space in Tribeca. The front room is the arena. It's where all the athletics or the performance is going. Athletics is just a metaphor for performance for me. The back room was the locker room, and the middle room, or the hallway, was the passage from the court to the locker room, right? So in the front room, we had this huge tapestry. And the image is just of James Brown. So there's a movie, The Blues Brothers. It's James Brown is preaching a sermon. He's the preacher. And I bought the rights to the image, and I thought, let me make this thing. I made this large tapestry. And the image is nice because it has this kind of digital glitch, this break. Dig? And you can read it from Hito Steyerl, the great writer, artist, what that really means. But I liked the way that chopped up the face, you know? And it became visually stimulating to me. But I wouldn't stop there. With the installs, the way I install them, I always install them so they're just barely brushing the ground. You're not supposed to do that. Tapestry's supposed to be nice and polite. Well, mine doesn't. Mine tiptoes, mine dances. Dig? Mine also moves with you. So when you get close, the air that you're giving it, it actually gives it back. And it has a life. When you hang them on the wall, they can't do that. When you put them in space and they're in the round, they can do that. It's a sculpture now, right? Here's the image from the coloring book. So it's at scale, let's see if we can get at scale. I don't have the image of scale. At scale, it's probably, I don't know, 24 inches from the ceiling. It's a big tapestry. And next to it, if you look on the wall here, is another one of my images of a police officer reflection. Here's the break in the car. Everything down here is not the reflection. Everything up here is reflection. This is actually not reflection, I just realized. This is the gun the muzzle of the gun that's on the hood of the car. This is the officer. This is the reflection of the gun on the hood of the car, blocking out the eyes of the cop. I thought that was metaphorical, like you wouldn't believe, dig? But I wouldn't stop there. Because the way we work the surface, which you all have here, we do all this brushing and stuff, turns the thing into a Seurat painting. It looks like Impressionism. And that's important because I study Seurat. And Seurat was the one who told me in his notebooks, or he identified in his notebooks, the relationship between weaving and painting. He was like, well, you know, weaving used to be primary because it was the way that people showed power. All I'm going to try to do is submit painting to weaving's rules. I'm trying to do the same thing. So even in this big one, when you get close, it has all of the letters that we've cut and stitched in. It has all these small photo objects that we make in my studio. So we take images from porn magazines, National Geographic, anything I can find. We cut them into small pieces, and then we use magic putty. It's an epoxy. Mix it by hand, sandwich two images together, morph them any way you want, put them between two tacks, let them dry. They harden in about 24 hours, drill a hole, and now you can stitch them. They're like these flecks of information, right? Because my belief is that images aren't just singular, they birth other images. There's other stuff behind there. Dig? And that all comes from me saying in the beginning, this image isn't real. There's something behind this thing that I can't see, and I'm trying to find it. So one of the bigger tapestries in the show, which is on this wall, this is like, it's not 9 feet tall, 13 feet long. It's called But Where. And I'm almost finished. It's called But Where. And what you're really looking at is athletes like LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Andre Iguodala jumping out of the arena over the crowd, trying to flee. And what I did was I just found a bunch of images, superimposed them, edited them, and it took a while, edited them so that not only were the subjects leaving, but the expression of the audience, the sheer terror, the surprise, that's absolute. It's brilliant to me. You know, and also the subtle transitions when the body is overlaid and superimposed. It creates this really beautiful dazzle to the eye. So that was on a big wall, and that wall was connected to this hallway. And in that hallway, we had all these tapestries of fans. We call them fanatics. They're addicted to this thing of fandom. And that comes from, what is it? This book I read called 100 Years of Lynching. It's nothing, a bunch of snippets of journalists from 1865 to 1970, it's not 100 years, recounting what it was like to be at these lynchings. And it's tough. It's very matter of fact and objective. And I started to read it and realized the way they're talking about this experience sounds like a basketball event. It sounds like a sport, it's a sports spectacle. The crowd goes wild. The mob lifts the body. And then I started reading it further and realized, oh, it's darker than that. Because these children are cutting off the body parts of the dead figure. They're looking for souvenirs. So in that hallway, what you have are these smaller tapestries of fanatics cheering. And the cheering is what I imagine is causing the total destruction of the image. So the real physicality here is breaking all of that down. Where in the other ones, like this big one, the image is still kind of whole and resolute. Does everybody dig me? But as I work through that, you get to the back room, and this is the killer. When you get to the back room, these really large tapestries, and this is supposed to be the locker room. Now the space is terrible. Such a hard place to install. Ugly. So terrible, but I did the best I could, and I think I slayed. So when you come into the back room to the right, and I'm serial with it. I use an image over and over again. It's the same James Brown image that you see up front. I just keep reusing it, right? But this is the killer. This thing is 12 feet tall, 10 feet wide maybe, I don't remember, 9 feet wide. And this one's called, the higher the monkey climbs the tree, the more he shows his ass. And that's important because the first time I met David Hammonds, he told me that. Messed me up something terrible. He whispered it into my ear. I was a PS1. Tilton introduced me to him. He pulled me close, and David said, remember, the higher the monkey climbs the tree, the more he shows his ass. And he chuckled, and he pushed me away, and I fell into this void. And I was like, no, I'm serious, man. This shit was metaphysical. I'd never seen anything like it. And then I was in Harlem the very next day at Corner Social, on what's that, like 127? Eating outside with my man Philandis, who got me this gig. Thank you, Philandis. We were having a burger, and I looked up and I said, it's David. And David's amazing because what he's doing is he walks around Harlem and he looks for things. And he's like photographing trash cans because his work is like found. It's beautiful. And he came up to me. I didn't think he remembered me. He literally came up to me. He was like, hey, I'm outside. I was like, oh, hi. He said, remember what I said? Monkey and ass. And then he walked away from me, and I was just like, and then Philandis was like, what was that about? I was like, last night he told me this brilliant thing about a monkey and an ass. It was amazing. So then years ago, I bought this taxidermy monkey. That was after I met him. No correlation. And I've always wanted to use it, and I had this chance to use it. So I took this image, and if you could turn your head, you probably can't see it. This would be the top, that would be the bottom. And what you're seeing, you probably can't see it, that's okay, is two hands here, a head here. These hands are on a car. His torso is here, his back leg is here, the car is here. And there's an officer in this big green blob, and he's searching him. The idea was to abstract the tree. So it's an abstracted tree. And then I took that taxidermy monkey and put it on the tapestry. And we hung it in such a way that you can't tell how it's hung, so it's just kind of suspended and floating. It's magic. Again, those are the details, because if you see the screws, it loses its magic. I see how the rabbit came out of the hat. I don't want to see that. I want to be amazed, you know? So I got with my man Pan, who built the frames for me. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, it needs to float. You can't see, it needs to be seamless. No rivets, it's got to float. He figured it out. And if you get really close, you see this little toy cop car with the doors open as if they have exited and now they're in the tapestry. But I wouldn't stop there. The way in which we work the surface looks like fur. That's important for me. I didn't figure that out until this past year. And I wanted to bring that notion of the animality, not just with race, the bestiality of blackness, but also what does it mean for something to turn into an animal? I don't know. The only thing I have thus far, because I just thought of this, is that when the human becomes, at the edge of humanity is the animal. So when the human becomes exhausted, the animal is possible. I'm trying to read exhaustion in a positive light, such that exhaustion isn't the end, exhaustion is just the transition to something else. I'll say that again. Being tired and exhausted is not the end, it's just a transition to something else. And in that something else, in that back room, in that locker room, I wanted to play that something else in another way, in an abstract way. So I bought these rugs, real cheap, like Staples. Everything gets delivered in New York. So I bought these 3 rugs, and this institution has these weird panels or something. And at one time, these rugs were out into space and they weren't here, and then it wasn't working. So I said to the curator, let me just go outside and look. And I was literally sitting here, and I stared inside for about 2 minutes, and I said, I think I got it. And I came in, and we moved them, and we built this wave. And then we took this thing here. Actually, I might have an image of it. Let me see. Yeah. It's a giraffe skull. It's a real giraffe skull, yeah. And it looks like a goat. And I was really interested in the fact that it looked like a goat. It exhausted its potential of being a giraffe. It could become a goat. And then I started to think a little bit more. I said, oh, well, the goat has everything to do with athletics. The greatest of all time. LeBron James, he's a goat. Michael Jordan, he's a goat. Not the original. The original goat's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the giraffe. And I thought it would be interesting to have this giraffe in a staring contest with this sculpture that I had made. So, I bought the death mask of James Brown. I own the death mask of James Brown. And I stared at that thing forever. It had so much power. And then I got my friend to come over. I said, I want to cast this, but I don't know what to do with it. She came over, we casted it. And I think a few days later, I was in Harlem at the African shop on 126. Greatest place in the world. And I bought this great Molly cup, right? And I brought it back to the studio, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I could graft that James Brown face onto this mug? Which is what we did. We cast the face, and then we shrunk it with like alginate, but we cast it in rubber and color matched it to the vase or to the cup. So it looks seamless. So when you see it in person, it's like, wait a minute, is this real? So the point is, what does it mean, and we're talking about exhaustion, what does it mean for the hardest working man in show business who was black to be in a staring contest with the GOAT? I don't know, but I'm interested in the question. I don't have answers, I just have questions or quanswers. That's when you get the question and the answer at the same time. That's interview shit. That's also Lupe Fiasco. That's one of his freestyles. But you'll understand in the work, and then I'll sum up. You'll understand in the work that there are a lot of connections in the space. So even when you're staring at this sculpture, it's making connections to other things in the space. So this like old suitcase ziggurat thing, if you stare on top of it, it creates a rectangle within a rectangle. You see that again in the space with these. I bought a whole slew of mugshots from the 60s and 70s. And I figured out how to dye them and then do these kind of Frank Stella, if you don't know Frank Stella, you should, these Frank Stella ziggurat patterns, and then I could delete some of the image. So this is all deletion. This is all that white stuff is all hand deletion. So when you get there, it still has that fluff. It becomes African. It takes the mugshot out of its own. So while that show is going on, the final show I have, is it belongs in a museum, real small space. And I did this for a friend. She asked me to do a show, I would. So I try to connect these two spaces. I took the idea of the goat and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the giraffe here. I found this image. Here we go. I found this image I bought of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar before he was Kareem. He was Lou Alcindor before he converted. He was playing for UCLA, and I was interested in this look of his eyes rolling at the back of the head, these two white cheerleaders in the 60s cheering him on. I thought, well, shit, they caught the giraffe. So the whole show is about catching this blackness. And they caught him. I turned it into this blue thing. We dye it blue in multiple colors of blue, and then we work the surface so it becomes like an animal. And the question for me is, well, who is the real animal? Is the animal the subject that's being caught, or the subject that's doing the catching? It's the subject that's doing the catching. This is La Cueva in Argentina, hand paintings, from Paleolithic age. And I like this stereotype of the caveman as being the Neanderthal, when the truth is they were smart as a whip. But I wanted to take that stereotype and apply it to the white witness. So I figured out how to do this kind of spray dye on top of my images so that it looked like these figures were being clawed at. That all comes from me reading books about cave art. You know what I mean? If you open yourself up to it, it's all there. You just gotta take it, it's yours. But let me finish with this. Again, another coloring book, the Harlem Globetrotters. I edited the whole thing, so it says, now you see it, now you don't. I put these in here, I edited all that, so he disappears. It's a magic trick. Black people are magic, man. But the final image, and the showstopper, which really connects the giraffe. You walk into the space, you walk into this small space, there's a box here on a very slim pedestal with the door open, but you can't see what's in the box, you see. And then you walk around it and you're hit with this. It's a giraffe leg that I hired someone to tattoo. And the tattoo that's on it is from a Harlem Globetrotter coloring book that I warped. And it's also a part of one of my tapestries, so I warped it. And the image, you can't see it so well, the image is the two players catching a hillbilly, like a Hatfield and McCoy, catching him in a bag. They've reversed the logic of the catch. No longer is the giraffe being caught, they're being caught. Does everybody dig me? And all that comes from starting at one space in this big space and then whittling all the way down till you get to this small gallery and then you get that reward. And I think, and you have to pay it, it's the detail, right? I could have turned that so it's inside that box, but it's just kind of like tiptoeing out. You dig? And it's also significant to think about the fact that the box itself used to be a camera box. So it's about capturing. The camera captures just like the box captures. And it's the black box. Does everybody dig me so far? Ah, very good. I'm finished. Thank you so much. I know it's getting late. Yeah, sure. I could do this all day. I've only had 2 things to do.
It is running late, but let's do 2 or 3 questions if anyone has them, unless everyone's trying to get out of the door into the rain.
Sorry, I'm so long-winded. I'm Southern.
All right, give me a second so we can get the questions on the mic, okay?
Sure. Look at the projections. These look so great here. I should have done the TIFFs. That's okay.
Hello?
Hi. What's your name, Governor?
Lucas.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm well.
All right. Awesome. I just wanted to ask, how much of the metaphor and symbolism in your pieces is fully intentional from the making of it, and how much of it develops over the course of creating a piece that maybe you might not necessarily have intended at the start?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'd say a huge portion is researched. And then what I usually do is because what the human mind is supposed to do is find patterns. That's what we do. And I'm just very conscious of them. So while I'm doing all this research, all I'm trying to do is find connections. I'm like John Nash or something, like boom, boom, boom. I'm like connections, you know? And my connections they can be very simple, like this word sounds like that word. What can I do with that? It's a very French way of functioning. Or my connection be like, historically these make sense. But things like the animal really worked out when I was so I have a team and I make my biggest strides when my team's not around. So they weren't there and I was working the surface and I started working the surface and it started to look like an animal. And I just said out loud, I was like, well, holy shit, it looks like an animal, Noel. And I jot that down and I take that idea and try to build a constellation. I'm just trying to build constellations, you know? Great question, though. Cosmology. Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Oh, you guys are killing me. Yeah,
one more.
What would you say,
Don't even need it. It's great.
I guess when you were in undergrad, you kind of, did for inspiration or studio practices?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no worries. Well, when I was in high school, I used to watch Art 21. Because I was in Louisville and we didn't, you know, what I used to do is I used to skip school. I used to skip to high school. And we had the Speed Art Museum and they never rotated the collection. So I always knew where everything was. So I would go down to the speed, and I used to park across the street at the frat until I got ticketed, and that shit got real. I was like, oh, I owe money. So what I used to do is I do that, right? So when I was an undergrad, we didn't have a museum proper in that small town. So I would go to the library, and I would like rent videos. I would just like watch, I just wanted to watch artists work. I do that now. I go on YouTube, I watch artists work all the time. I can sit at home and just be like, damn, I love the way Gerhard Richter is scraping that thing, you know? Or I love the way Diebenkorn is making that print at Crown Point or whatever. I love watching artists work. I also look for ideas where I know no one's looking. Because you'll find, my experience is I find a lot of people who are artists tend to mine the same sources. That's boring. I'm just looking for something that no one's looking for, you know? I think the best way to think about it is when they say, like, we talked about it earlier, about Charlie Parker. You know, Charlie Parker used to go to the east side and sit by the East River, and listen to birds. And people would be like, and they called him Bird. And they would be like, but why do you do that? He said, I'm listening for something to play. He understood that they were doing bebop before even anybody knew what it was, you know? He knew it, he could hear it. He just had to figure it out. Nobody was looking for that. You dig what I'm saying? That helped. And music. Music and rest. I'm looking at tired faces right now. I know y'all tired, but come on, y'all. You need to take care of yourselves, man. Self-care as artists is important because you don't last if you don't do that. You dig? And then always be mindful of the sources that positively inform you. Surround yourself with the people who help you, because the people who don't are going to be more. There's a lot more of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Great question though. Any more questions? Bueller. Yeah, what's up, fam? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What keeps you going, motivated, artistically?
Questions. So I tell my students, when this is over and you graduate, I'm not paid to come and talk to you anymore. I love you, but I'm not gonna come and talk to you if I don't have to, because I got my own life, right? And if you can't come to your studio with questions every day, why are you going there? I am infinitely curious. My father taught me that. He said, just stay curious. You'll never be bored. I am infinitely curious. And when I get bored, if that ever happens, I usually just go to a museum and I can walk around for a while. What I do is I have a soundtrack, and I play music, and I give myself an hour. I just walk around the Met for an hour. And then I go to Central Park and I just sit there and think, you know? Yeah. Yeah, that keeps me motivated. Questions. Any more? Ah, yes. What is your name, family?
I'm Maddie.
A pleasure to meet you.
I love the music that you played at the beginning.
Oh, Kronben's it's flames, baby. Kronben is flames. They do live shows. Their live shows are even better. And they travel. They're good. Thank you.
Like, are they going to play here soon?
Just look them up. Look them up. They probably, I would imagine they would do something. Now I understand Baton Rouge is the highest population. They might go to Baton Rouge. They might go to New Orleans, you know. But if you get a chance, I would advocate seeing them. The sister on the I think she's like a bass guitar. Whew. Sister is fierce. The brother on drums slaps. And then they every now and then they'll do vocals. And then they also pair with other vocalists, like the Texas Sun album and the Texas Moon. Listen. Flames. Ooh. Morella. Do. It takes you somewhere. That's what helps me. Sometimes I just sit in my studio and lay on the couch and just listen to music for hours, and it takes me somewhere, you know? And I allow myself to go there. And the other thing is live jazz. If you can get live jazz in your life, it's different. Because it's like sculpture. It penetrates you differently. I've never left, especially in a small club, because the acoustics are different, I've never left the Village Vanguard unhappy. I always leave ready to work. It's like 2 in the morning, I'm like, I'm ready to go to the studio, you know? Yeah, watching other people be creative is very, very helpful. Any other questions? You have me here, you want to milk me while you can, because when I'm gone, it's over. They sent me here for all of this. Yes, ma'am. What's your name, family?
Lauren,
A pleasure to meet you.
have you ever used sound to
Oh, I forgot about that.
loop your pieces, like the decimal range?
Ah,
And
no.
the structure of the text?
That I haven't done. Not yet. But what I have done in terms of sound is I've done sound projects. Like I did a show at the Contemporary Arts Center in Cincinnati, and they had this like amazing grid where the lights were. I embedded speakers in them, and I worked on this soundtrack where it's like James Baldwin is smoking cigarettes and talking, and I put him over jazz, and then I would like fade in Rashawn Roland Kirk talking about things, and then Richard Pryor would talk. It was all these sources that I had, and while you were in the space, you just heard this sound pumping on top of you. Very subtle, you know? But in the show at BMCC, the Black Exhaustion, I did this performance where I hired dancers, and we bought them security guard uniforms with NWA Studios as security. And they were instructed to stand like security guards, and they were black, which is important because a lot of the security of museums are peoples of color. And they were just kind of standing there, and they were instructed sometime within the span of the show, put your headphones in, play whatever you want, and just start dancing. So I have footage, I can't show now, but I have footage of Iwe, who's a dancer. He was just there. Please don't touch that, thank you. Ma'am, mind the gap, thank you. Please don't touch the art. People will be touching each other. Please don't touch the art. Because the art is the experience, you feel me? How are you in an experience you can't touch? That dog don't hunt, dig? So then all of a sudden he just leaned back, and then I was talking to a friend and I looked over at him, he put his headphones in, and he was just like, and then he went onto the rug with a giraffe, and he did this whole King Kunta thing. It was beautiful. And everybody was like, what the fuck? And my friend was like, what is this? I was like, what are you talking about? I'm trying to talk to you. I was acting like it didn't even happen, you dig? And he did it, and Dave was in the other room doing his, and then when they were done, they went right back over to the wall. Like it never happened. And the question for me was like, what happens when the refrigerator light goes off? Which means, what happens during the break? What do you do? What is the reprieve during the break? Well, for these people, it's going to be dance. And I'm trying to take that performance and put it all over the world, man. Because I used to go to the Met and look at these security guards and be like, well, what if you just started dancing right now? Like, what if you was like, screw everything, I'm just going to just get it. Just Harlem shake and then just go back like nothing ever happened. I thought it was brilliant. It really worked, you know. It's a great question, though. Any more questions? I can do this forever.
One last question.
Sure.
The painting in the corner, sorry, I can't pronounce the name.
Oh, somnambulist?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting, and I really can't understand it. So
That's fair.
could you like
Sure. Yeah, well. So the one in the corner with those flowers and the letters, the somnambulist, which is a sleepwalker. If you read, you could, what is that? Is it the Captain of Dr. Caligari, the famous silent film? It's all about somnambulism. It's a great movie. If you want to talk about angles in German expressionism and print, it's a great movie. And if you read Ellison's Invisible Man, it's all about, a lot of that is the subtext of sleepwalking. Like he's moving through the world and think he's doing something, but really he ain't seeing shit because he's asleep. He doesn't get it. He's not woke, dig? And it's about that kind of availability to wokeness. It's about sleepwalking through the world and not being conscious that something's happening. And I thought that so what I've done is, I essentially took an ebony page, because if it's a magazine and I'm about paper and stuff, and I took it here and I bleached the entire center out. And I figured out how to control it so it wouldn't really damage the edge. So I built a frame with the image itself, dig? And then I took these flowers that I dip in resin to solidify and put them as eyes. It's real surreal. That doesn't have an answer, you dig? And then the language in the eyes doesn't necessarily have an answer. It just made sense at the time, you know? And maybe for me, it's about those two surfaces meeting each other. You know, that kind of the braille of the language of the text, because the bumps of the text become like braille, meet that natural form. You know, and I couldn't just have one. The eyes just made total sense. Yeah, that's how that worked out. Any more questions? I know it's getting late for y'all. Yeah, what's up, family?
How much would you say you play as an
Oh,
artist?
Darrah taught me that. The whole thing is play. That's why I'm having so much fun. It doesn't always work. There are days when you're frustrated, right? There are days when you're like, oh, shit, didn't work. And those are a lot. I make a lot of work, I fail a lot. I love failing. Because I'm able to step back now after the failure and say, okay, but wait a minute now. Is it a failure, or did something happen here that I could learn from and maybe control next time? Play gets me there.
Another question. Do
Sure.
you play with a goal in mind, or do you play until something speaks to you?
Oh, it's like jazz. I play with a goal in mind, but understand that improvisation is necessary, so that's involved in it. And, you know, Fred Moten teaches us that. He'll say something like, you know, improvisation is about, you know, not being ready, but you have to be ready to improv. So how do you practice improvisation? I don't know. John Coltrane must have done it because he could improv like nobody's business. Miles Davis could improv like nobody's business. Did he practice that? I don't know. But he practiced by playing, you know. Practice and play. Those are two P's that you should all know. Practice and play. Everything I do is practice and everything I do is play. You know. Also, I have to be playful because the imagery, the content is so hard, you know. And I don't want to be emotionally bogged down by that, you know. Any more questions? Bueller. You also, wait a minute. You should follow me on IG. I need more followers. NWA_studios. Hit your boy. Yes, sir.
This is a big question, but
That's okay.
do you think that there is such a thing as bad art?
Yes. Yes. Okay, so this is the thing they don't teach you in the world until you go and see it for yourselves. You know, you get stung by the bee. When you go to the galleries in New York, you're like, this is it? This is the stuff that everybody's flipping over? It's terrible. Poor craft. There's a lot of people who are famous who can't draw to save their lives. They can't handle paint. They have no facility. And I was trying to tell some of the students in print, if you have facility with your hands, you're going to be fine. If you can draw, if you can make stuff, if you are skilled, you'll be fine. Because it's not just like I'm gonna be an artist. You can get a job being a conservator at a museum. That's your 9 to 5, and then when you get off, you go make art. A friend of mine is a conservator at the Met, and she handles all of these like prehistory objects, and she's 3D scanning them. And she's like, I'm gonna take some of these scans, I'm gonna make them into my work. You know, my father taught me, he was like, get a job that'll also benefit you at the job. And I try to do that. Being a professor helps. Being an artist helps even more. Any more questions? Bueller. One more in the back. Yes, ma'am. Ah, hello. Your name again, ma'am? How are you doing? How's that print going? Listen, Brian would say, it's all right, everything's okay. That's all artists do. So what's the question, man?
Did you ever find a point where your art shifted dramatically and
Ooh. Yes. It shifted when I was in Indiana. When I went to grad school in Indiana, and you know, I wasn't prepared for that, and I was trying to keep up with everybody because everybody was making a certain kind of work, and I was like, I guess that's what I have to do. And I tried, and then I just got to a point where I was like, this is not it anymore. Like, this is not it. I just had to find a way, and it took me a long time, but I found it, I think. You know, I spent 13 years in a bunker trying to figure out how to make this tapestry thing. You know, and that was hard because there were other people who were making tapestries and they were just doing basic stuff with it. It was like, okay, that's what you do. It's textile, you applique and you stitch on it. But what else can it be, you know? So I actually became a better artist by hitting a wall and also realizing I just don't want to do what everybody else does. Yeah, and I'm willing to walk the line on that. Well, so thank you so much. I hope I didn't talk too much. And if you have any more questions, I'll be here for a second. Thank you. Yeah.